Hello, and welcome to The Hidden Layers. I'm your host, Ava. Today we're talking about comorbidities of eating disorders through what researchers call a transdiagnostic lens, meaning we're looking beyond the labels and exploring the deeper biological systems these disorders share. As someone who has lived through this reality, I know how often eating disorders are dismissed as dieting gone too far, vanity, or simply a matter of choice. But modern research tells a completely different story. Eating disorders are not trends, phases, or lifestyle decisions. They are severe, biologically rooted metapsychiatric illnesses that impact both the brain and body simultaneously. These illnesses also carry the highest mortality rate of any psychiatric disorder, driven not only by systemic medical complications, but also dramatic elevated risks of suicide. And that statistics alone should completely change the way society talks about them. But the reality is that eating disorders are incredibly complex. They involve genetics, reward pathways, fear circuitry, metabolism, sensory processing, compulsive behavior, trauma-related responses, all interacting at once. They are not isolated illnesses sitting neatly in a diagnostic box. They are deeply interconnected disorders that overlap with nearly every major branch of psychiatry and neuroscience today. We're peeling back those hidden layers. Segment 2. The chicken or the egg research game. One of the biggest questions researchers ask is what came first? Did the brain differences exist before the eating disorder developed, or did the starvation and malnutrition create those changes afterwards? The NIH often refers to this as the chicken or the egg framework, which separates the premorbid traits biological markers present before illness from stay-related effects, meaning changes caused by starvation itself. Let's break this down disorder by disorder. Anorexia. Researchers using the temporal difference model shows that individuals with anorexia often have hypersensitive dopamine responses to unexpected rewards. In neuroscience, this is called prediction error response. Structurally, many patients also show increased volume in the right insula region, a region heavily involved in the interoception or ability to sense and interpret the internal body states. This helps explain one of the most misunderstood aspects of anorexia, how someone can feel so overweight even while they're severely underweight. The brain is literally processing the body perception differently. Bulimia. Bulimia appears to involve almost the opposite reward pattern. Instead of hypersensitive reward system, the research shows a hypo-responsive reward system. The stratum, which helps process pleasure and reward, shows a reduced response to stimulation. Researchers believe this may contribute to binge eating behaviors because individuals may need stronger stimulation to achieve what feels like a normal level of satisfaction. Binge eating disorder. BED is now recognized as the most prevalent eating disorder in adults. Genetic studies reveal something especially important here. BED has a positive polygenic correlation with ADHD and impulse control disorders. This suggests that these conditions may share overlapping neurological architecture involving impulsivity, behavioral inhibition, and reward regulation. In other words, the issue is not simply a lack of self-control. The brain itself may be wired differently. Avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, ARFID. ARFID is also misunderstood because it does not center around the body image concerns. Instead, it is strongly associated with sensory sensitivities, many of which overlap with traits seen in autism spectrum disorder. For many individuals with ARFID, food textures, smells, temperatures, or appearances can trigger an intense distress or even a panic response. This makes eating feel neurologically overwhelming rather than emotionally motivated. Segment 3, dual diagnosis, the 95% statistics. In clinical research, having both an eating disorder and another psychiatric condition is called a dual diagnosis. And here's the shocking reality. It's not rare, it's actually the norm. Study shows that up to 95% of individuals with eating disorders meet the criteria for at least one additional psychiatric disorder. That statistic alone completely dismantles the myth that eating disorders exist in isolation. Generalized anxiety disorder, GAD. Hi, I'm Eva. I'm the voice of generalized anxiety disorder. Around 62% of eating disorder patients also experience an anxiety disorder. Research shows that this anxiety often becomes centered around weight gain, body image, food, and control, effectively hijacking the brain's fear circuitry. Major depressive disorder. Hi. I represent major depressive disorder, which impacts up to 75% of individuals with eating disorders. One of the biggest clinical complications is what researchers call malnutrition mimicry. Starvation itself can create symptoms like emotional numbness, irritability, hopelessness, exhaustion, and social withdrawal. These symptoms can look nearly identical to major depression, making diagnosis extremely difficult until nutritional rehabilitation begins. OCD and body dysmorphic disorder. Now, let's talk genetics. Recent 2024-2025 genome-wide association studies found a 0.49 genetic correlation between anorexia and OCD, which is considered the second highest psychiatric genetic overlap identified so far. Researchers also described something called a certainty trap. Behaviors like body checking, calorie counting, mirror checking, repetitive waiting are meant to create reassurance and certainty, but paradoxically, the research shows they actually reduce subjective certainty, reinforcing the compulsive cycle instead of calming it. Segment 4, the neural web. So why do these disorders overlap so heavily? The answer lies in shared brain circuitry. Many eating disorders, OCD spectrum disorders, and anxiety disorders involve dysfunction with the CSTC circuitry. Within this loop, the orbitofrontal cortex becomes hyperactive, the anterior cingulate cortex becomes hyperactive. The brain develops a persistent feeling that something is wrong or incomplete. That feeling creates a powerful urge for rituals or compulsions, whether that means calorie counting, body checking, compulsive exercise, or repetitive safety behaviors. Researchers also describe something called starvation habit model. Restriction may begin as a conscious goal-directed behavior, but over time it shifts to the dorsolateral stratum, the brain region associated with automatic habit formation. Once that happens, behaviors become increasingly automatic and resistant to logical reasoning, even when severe physical harm is occurring. This is one reason why eating disorders can feel so impossible just to stop. Segment 5, reframing treatment, integrated care. All of this research fundamentally changes how treatment should work. Integrated ERP, the gold standard treatment for OCD, is exposure and response prevention, or ERP. But in eating disorders, ERP often needs modification. Treatment may require patients to face both food-related fears and body image triggers simultaneously rather than treating them as separate issues. Diagnostic masking. Clinicians also need to carefully identify the motivation behind rituals. For example, is someone avoiding food, they fear contamination or harm? Is someone avoiding food because they fear contamination or harm, or because they fear gaining weight? Those motivations matter because the behaviors may look identical externally while stemming from entirely different neurological processes. Refeeding first. Another major finding is that cognitive traits such as cognitive rigidity often persist after weight restoration. This means recovery is not simply about eating again. Long-term treatment must address the underlying neurocognitive patterns and personality phenotypes that contribute to relapse risk. Segment 6. Thank you for joining me at the Hidden Layers. When we examine the DNA, the neural circuitry, the reward pathways, and the genetic correlations, the picture becomes undeniable. Eating disorders are not failures of willpower. They are deeply interconnected biological illnesses involving the brain, the body, and the nervous system all at once. And maybe that means it's time we stop forcing these disorders to fit into tiny diagnostic boxes, because the research makes one thing very clear. These illnesses do not exist in a box. They exist in an ocean. And recovery begins when we finally understand how deep those waters really are. Thank you for tuning in.